Well, good morning. 1 year ago this week, life changed for all of us. March 15th, 2020 is what we refer to as our first COVID Sunday. Ministry immediately changed. How we live our lives immediately changed. So much changed in 1 year. We're glad you're here. We're glad you're here in person. We're glad you're here live streaming with us across multiple platforms. We're glad you're here with us at the First Baptist family. When life changes in a moment, it can be difficult. When life changes in a moment, it could be good. This morning, we're going to look at a passage of a man who had lived an incredibly difficult life for an extended period of time. But all that changed in an instant for him in one moment. It's Mark chapter 5. If you want to go ahead and turn in your Bibles to Mark chapter 5, or if you want to pull it up and flip to Mark chapter 5, either way, head on over to Mark 5, and let's talk for a minute about the backstory while you're turning there. In Mark 5, right before chapter 5 starts, I want to set up chapter 4. So while you're turning there, Jesus has been talking with a large group of people on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, and he's been giving them a lot of parables. After a day of giving them parable after parable, in the evening, he tells his disciples, you know what, let's go over to the other side of the lake. Let's go over to the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee. So they get together and they head out on some boats and they head to the eastern shore. During the night, an incredibly difficult storm came up. It was just an amazing, it'd be great cinematography, but this scene going across the Sea of Galilee, a horrible storm came up. The wind and the waves were crashing so badly, the disciples thought the boat was going to be swamped, and they turn around looking for Jesus, and he's asleep in the back of the boat. So they promptly wake him up. Don't you care? Don't you care if we all drown here? And he wakes up, and he immediately calms the wind and the waves. Everything gets calm, and he gets on to them a little bit because of their lack of faith and what they were afraid of. And their response was, who is this man? They were fearful. Who is this man who controls the wind and the waves? That's the setup. That's right before, overnight, heading to the eastern shore. That's what happens right before we get into our story in Mark chapter 5, verse 1. So, Mark 5, verse 1, let's just dig in. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. All right, hold it, stop right there. I know that was just one verse. It'll pick up here in just a second. But they went to the lake, they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes, okay? This area where they went on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, let me tell you a little bit about it. The Sea of Galilee, basics of the Sea of Galilee, it's about 7-8 miles wide at its widest point, about 12-13 miles north to south. And you might be thinking, you know what, that actually sounds a whole lot more like a lake than a sea. In your Western way of thinking, you wouldn't be wrong. In fact, Luke calls it a lake, and so does Mark. But in the Semitic or Jewish mindset, any large body of water was considered a sea. That's why they call it the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is surrounded on all sides by low mountains and hills, so that there are slopes down to the sea, with the exception of 3 small areas, but none of those come into our story today. So it's like the bottom of a bowl. So when storms come up, the wind and the waves can create havoc very quickly at the bottom of the cliffs and the slopes there at the sea. So that's why those storms can come up so fiercely. Jesus comes across on the eastern shore, probably modern day Coursey. The village today, modern day Coursey, probably the most likely place where they arrived. Coursey is about a quarter mile offshore. About 40 yards from the shore is a steep hillside that goes down to the lake, so it fits the geography of the story. And what I love about archaeology and geography is it supports the biblical narrative. So these are true stories, folks. These were not made up. These are true stories that actually happened in time and history, and that's why I love this Bible. All right, there are caverns, there are tombs, there are caves. I was looking at some pictures this week of that geography, and they're still there. You can see them if you went over there. You could see the caves and the caverns where the dead are buried and some people used to live. That's the setting of what we're going to talk about. It's a Gentile region. It's not a Jewish region. It's a Gentile region called the 10 cities. You see it as the Decapolis. That's the environment we're in. Verse 2. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. Wow. Now, this story is not recorded in John, but it is recorded in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew tells us that there are two men here. Mark and Luke talk about one. There's no discrepancy here. There's no issue here. Matthew likes to be specific. So Matthew's going to tell you everybody on the roster. Mark and Luke are going to tell you about the player in the game who scored the touchdown. Okay, it's just a matter of focus. It's three different camera angles on the same story here, but we're going to take a look through Mark. This guy we see in Luke 8 is local. He's from that area. He's from the town. So we don't see that in Mark, but we do see it in Luke. That's why it's helpful to get three different perspectives on this story. It adds and it fills in. So Luke 8, this guy's local. We don't see it here immediately, but we do in Luke that this guy has not worn clothes in a very long time. He has not lived in a house for a very long time. The disciples are getting into a troubling encounter immediately after getting out of a troubling encounter. It's been a rough night for those boys. And this morning is not shaping up to be any different. Matthew 8:28 tells us that these guys, especially the one we're talking about here in Mark 5, these guys were so violent that no one could pass that way. And along comes Jesus to interact with him. Verse 3 says, this man lived in the tombs and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons with his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. This man, possessed by these demons, had heightened strength from the evil forces that filled him. The word that Mark uses for subdue is the word they used for taming a wild animal. This guy was violent, he was harsh, fierce, savage, extremely dangerous, and isolated from the community. Said night and day he was screaming and shrieking in the hills and in the tombs. And the term cutting himself, is only used here in the New Testament. And it carries the idea of cutting something up or cutting it into pieces. This is very graphic imagery Mark is using to convey the message of what's going on that day. Luke says that the man met Jesus at the shore as soon as he landed. Mark tells us that he saw him from a distance and he met him, but Luke says, he was there when he first put foot on shore. This demon knew who Jesus was, and he knelt. I don't think he was kneeling in worship, but I think he was kneeling with respect because he knew the Son of God, the Creator. And God opened my eyes to something this week as I was studying through this. I hadn't seen it before in quite this way, but over in Luke, chapter 8, verse 29, it talked about many times the demon had seized him, And though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. It was the solitary places that caught my attention. The demon had driven him into solitary places. I don't think that was accidental. I think that was very intentional to drive this guy into solitary, isolated places, because as an image bearer, men and women are made in the image of God. As image bearers, we are designed to be in relationship and in community with one another. So the demon drove him out of community into isolation and into solitary areas. See, we are most effective as Christians when we are pursuing the mission of God together, in community, in relationship. You say, well, what is the mission of God? It's pretty straightforward. Love God, love others, make disciples. And if the enemy can get in and separate us out of relationship and out of community, that reduces our effectiveness for Christ. So he drove him into solitary areas that had to have been incredibly difficult for an image bearer made to be in relationship. All right, let's get back to our story. Verse 7. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear to God that you won't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Jesus asked him, "What's your name?" "Well, my name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. This demon wanted to let everyone know who had just come to the Eastern Shore. And he had an interesting lead question. The question he asked was a very interesting leading question here. What do you want with me, Jesus? Now, that may not communicate much to us in modern Western civilization, but in that time period, it was an ancient saying. It was an ancient saying that basically meant, what do we have in common? Or maybe we would put it today, mind your own business. That's what the demon was saying. What do you have to do with me? What are you doing over here? Mind your own business, Jesus. It's interesting that in the Old Testament, we see this phrase used twice. And it's used by, interestingly enough, King David. King David uses this ancient phrase twice in 2 Samuel, and both times he is telling who he's talking to, mind your own business. That's exactly what this meant. He's saying what happens on the Eastern Shore stays on the Eastern Shore. This has nothing to do with you. You belong on the other side. This has nothing to do with you over here. Get out, mind your own business. It's interesting that this demon begs and begs to not have Jesus send them out of the area. They apparently don't want to be tortured, but they have no issue torturing this man incessantly and mercilessly for a very long period of time. We see in Mark and Luke, or Matthew and Luke, that they were asking not to be sent to their final punishment, to the abyss. That's what Matthew and Luke tell us. And so they're begging him. The word begging there is the word for pleading with intensity. They're intensely pleading with him, please, please, again and again and again, don't send us out to our final punishment, to the abyss. Jesus asks, what's your name? And the demon says, my name is Legion. And when he said Legion, that would have caught the attention of so many people there in occupied Palestine. The Legion was the largest unit of the Roman army, up to 6,000 soldiers. There was a lot going on inside this man that day. Let's look at verse 10. And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. Intensely pleading with Jesus. That's going to be important. We're actually going to see that word some more in this passage, but keep that in mind. The begging, pleading with intensity. Look at verse 11. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, there's that word again, send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them. He gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. And that is where a lot of the readings of this story end. A lot of times when people tell this story, that's where they stop. There's a lot more left in it. But let's talk about verse 11 through 13. The herd of the pigs were on the eastern side. This would not have been necessarily uncommon for the eastern shore because it was mainly a Gentile area. You wouldn't have seen a herd of pigs on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee because really the Jews believed that pigs were unclean, and so that would not have been something you saw over there, but it is something that you see on the eastern shore. So 2,000 herd of pigs right there on the hillside by where this event is happening. And we see, verse 12, that begging, that pleading with intensity again with Jesus. I think they probably realized that Jesus was not going to allow them to stay in an image bearer. He's not going to allow them to stay in someone he created in his image. I think they knew their time was coming. So Jesus gave them permission, and 2,000 pigs, if you can get that picture in your head, 2,000 of them rushed down the hill, remember the bowl, rushed down the hill into the lake, one after another, 2,000 times, and they were drowned. Literally, what Mark says, the term he uses is literally they were choked or strangled by the sea. Again, graphic imagery. Mark's very descriptive. Now, I will say this. Some folks feel bad for all the pigs, but they don't bat an eye about the intense abuse and suffering this guy endured for a very long time. Imagine being a bystander. Put yourself on the shore that day. Imagine being a bystander or a witness to this event, watching it live. What would your response have been to this event? Let's check in with some of them. Verse 14. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside. And the people went out to see what had happened. Yeah, I bet they did. I bet they did. I mean, can you imagine this? So you're one of the pig farmers, you're one of the pig herders, and you go back to town, your herd's gone. Just not lost, they're gone. So you can imagine going back, hey, all right, look, we got to tell y'all something. The pigs are dead, but it's not our fault. Seriously. The pigs are dead. Yes, all of them. Well, okay, so some guy landed on shore, and he started talking to the crazy man, and then all of a sudden, all of them went down the hill, rushed down the hill, and jumped into the lake and drowned. Yeah, all of them. Oh, you don't believe me? Well, that's fine. Go take a look. See for yourself. It's exactly what they did. Verse 15, when they came to Jesus, that's a hard story to hear and take at face value, not something you see every day. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Sitting there, clothed, in his right mind for the first time in a very long time. It's not what they thought about this guy. That's not how they saw him. This would have been very troubling. The words that Mark uses are conveying sound mind, clear-headed, calm, behaving normally. This is a 180-degree turn from what they had experienced with this guy and the other one for a very long period of time. So you think, okay, well, this guy's been freed. He's one of theirs. He's one from their area. Their response would be that the people would rejoice, right? Oh, wait, that's not their response. That wasn't what you were expecting. Wasn't what I was expecting. See, I think they realized that something incredibly powerful had control of this man for a very long time. And in one instant, something even more incredibly powerful defeated that other something very powerful. And they had no idea where it came from. It unnerved them. They were afraid, it says at the end of verse 15. Let's look at 16. Those who had seen it, the eyewitnesses there, told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. It's interesting how Mark, inspired by the Holy Spirit, phrases these things. Told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. The way Mark phrases the wording here emphasizes that the impact of the economic loss of the pigs was the primary concern, not the life transformation of the man. So their response to Jesus was respect, praise. No. The response was quite the opposite. It says in verse 17, they began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. That word, again, is the same word that the demons used twice earlier, a few verses ago, pleading with intensity, begging him to leave us and get out. Wouldn't you like to know the person who could save a man under that kind of oppression? Their answer was no, we don't. In fact, we want you to leave immediately. Think about this. If you were that man, how would that make you feel if your own people seemed to have more care and concern about a herd of pigs than the fact that you had been tortured mercilessly and incessantly for years? How would that make you feel? Let's see how it made the man feel. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus had accomplished his purpose, which I believe was to go to the other shore and to free this man from his oppression. So Jesus has accomplished his purpose. He decides to leave. He's getting back on the boat, and then something happens. The man who had been freed from the demons begs Jesus to go with him. Yes, that beg word is the same pleading with intensity. Jesus, let me come with you. It's the same word the demons used. It's the same word the townspeople used. It's the same word here that he's using to please let me go with you, Jesus. And the way Mark phrases this request, it's very similar to the way he phrases the original calling of the apostles in Mark chapter 3, verse 14. What this man is saying essentially is, let me sit at your feet and learn from you like an apostle or a disciple. I mean, I can't blame him after the local response, right? The only person in years to show love and care for him is leaving. Now, there's a twist in the story. And I don't think it's one you're going to see coming. Let's look at verse 19. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." Jesus, I want to learn from you. I want to sit at your feet. I want to be your disciple. I want to come follow you. No. I want you to stay here, and I want you to go to your family, to your household, to your own people, and tell them about me. Tell them about the mercy that I had for you. Can you imagine how hard that would be for this guy? Everything they know about him, everything he's been through, how much they don't necessarily care about him. Did Jesus know what he was asking this man to do, going to his own house and his own family, his own people, and talk about God? Yes, he did, actually. In fact, we see in the very next chapter, chapter 6 of Mark, Jesus says a very famous line. He says, "Only in his hometown, among his relatives, and in his own house is a prophet without honor." Jesus is talking about himself in his hometown. He knew what it was like to take the message to his own people, his family even, his friends. That's what he's asking this man to do on this day. Is it hard? Yes. But it's worth pouring your entire life into. So what would your response have been? You want to follow Jesus, and Jesus says, "No, I need you to stay here, tell your own family, tell your own friends, tell your neighbors about who I am, spread the word." What would your response have been? Let's see what he did. So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. This man goes and does what Jesus tells him to do. I think it's important, though, that we also, what we don't see this guy doing. We don't see this guy saying, "Well, because you're not going to let me follow you, Jesus, that's what I wanted to do. I don't care what you say. This is my life. I'm going to do what I want." We don't see him doing that. We see him going immediately and fulfilling what God told him to do. He's focused on fulfilling the mission and the purpose that God gave him. So what's our take home from this today? I see a lot of love in this passage, actually. There's a lot of love in this passage. There's a lot of love. Jesus loved this man so much that he went across a troubled sea to rescue him and free him. Jesus loved the community, the people of that area so much that he gave them a messenger to share about the mercy and the love that God has for humanity. And Jesus loved this man so much that he put him back into community to restore broken relationships that he had, to get back into fellowship in community with his own people and those around him. See, Jesus knew that humans were not designed to live isolated and alone. He created them. He created them for community, for relationship, and for fellowship. Community is needed in the heart and in the lives of everyone. Not just the man, but the people he was trying to reach. Community and relationships are what we are designed for. So the question for us this morning is taking that message of love, which we still take today. We carry that same message of love today. The fact that Jesus died on the cross for our sins to save us and forgive us, that he was buried and he was raised again. That's the message of the gospel that we take today. That's that message of love 2,000 years later that we take today. Now, is that going to be easy? God tells us to go talk to our family and our friends and our neighbors in our community. Is that going to be easy to do? Probably not. But is it worth committing your entire life to as long as we're here on earth? Absolutely. Let's pray.